The tunnel loomed before me. A chill crept up my spine. As animals evolved on this bizarre world, we have built in instincts designed to help us steer clear of places like this. My job is to ignore those warnings. My name is Solomon Sleet, and if you're reading this, then I survived. Good for me. I'm a paranormal investigator. No, not the kind you see on the television with high tech gear and high strung personalities to match. Those dumb kids bang on as if science held all the answers to the otherworldly. Here's the hot tip: it doesn't. There are no scientific explanations for the things I see, but there are rules. Rules that can be exploited to one's advantage. The trick is knowing which rules to apply when, which is why I specialize. Know your enemy and all that. I switched on my flashlight and shone it into the darkness ahead, revealing a few empty cans of spray paint and rushed graffiti. Why rushed? Because vandals or graffiti artists, whatever you want to call them, normally have the time afforded to them by the cover of darkness to go about their work. No sane person would willingly walk into the Elliott Street underpass at night. No sane person. What does that make me? An idiot at best, a madman at worst, I guess. I could live with that. I took a deep breath to steel my resolve and took my first step in. Elliott Street Underpass is not one of those places you hear about. Urban legends and myths spring up around old houses or dark walkways, and people love to create tales of such places to give them a thrill of safe fear. I've always found such tales amusing, seeing as the places at the heart of such stories are never in any way dangerous. The real danger is in the places that no one talks about. No one likes to even think about such places. Their thoughts shy away from them. It's all part of our own instincts, our sixth sense. I call it survival. I've been watching the tunnel for 3 nights from a distance. On two separate occasions, a drunk staggering from Tony's around the corner will come this way and, without breaking stride, completely ignore the underpass and climb up the hill to cross the 6 lanes of traffic that is constantly screaming by over Elliott Street. You see, you can see it in them. They don't even notice the underpass. They don't want to. They'd rather risk vehicular manslaughter than even consider the possibility that the underpass exists. And now, here I was, standing inside the tunnel. The temperature dropped, and even with my long coat and scarf, I was chilled to the bone. In the torchlight, I could see my breath frosting before me. On cases like this, there's always a part of me, possibly the sane part, that hopes I'm wrong and I could go home, have scotch, feed Thor, and go to bed. More often than not, that part of me is disappointed, and tonight was no exception. As if the temperature had not been enough to confirm my suspicions, the flashlight flickered and went out. I stood in complete darkness, and fear rose up within me, unbidden and as powerful today as my first day on the job, oh, so many years ago. But I'm no rookie. The paranormal often plays havoc with electronics. So I pulled out my Zippo and lit the flame. I wish I could say this didn't happen often, but the bill for my lighter fluid will attest otherwise. The flickering and tentative light soothed the panic, and I was completely in control of my faculties again. There is nothing more I hate than my own fear. I should have mastered it by now. I should be hardened by all the horrors I've seen. But every night I still put on fear like a coat before I go about my business. Still, after 10 years of this, I've not once let it get the better of me, but every night I think it will. I began walking. Each step towards the center of the tunnel brought me closer to histrionics. The terror churned in my gut, making my legs feel weak, my spine tremble. I knew this, though. This was no longer my fear. This was an emotion emanating from whatever it was that had made Elliott Street Underpass its home. I suspected I knew who it was, but I hoped I was wrong. And then I stepped to the point in the tunnel where both ends joined, the dead center of the tunnel. If anything was going to happen, this was the spot. There's a power in shapes and places, same as there are in words and rules. The center, or nexus, as those of us in the know call this place, is where certain kinds of otherworldly energy will be strongest. Sure enough, my lighter was extinguished. The chill and fear returned greater than ever. "It's dark in here, mister." The cherubic voice came from behind me. The tunnel ahead of me lit up with blue phosphorescence. I froze. I turned around slowly to look at her. My suspicions were confirmed. Little Annie Toller went missing in this area a few years ago when this tunnel was still being constructed. I've seen spirits before. Most of them were images of how they'd been in life. Some were not pretty, but Annie, poor Annie, where her eyes should have been were bright blue balls of energy, the source of the light. Her face was dripping away, revealing bone underneath. I was thankful that at least her spirit wore a remembered dress, covering most of the horror from my mortified gaze. I've never seen a spirit in such state of disrepair before. She even looked like she'd been gnawed on, as if she'd taken the form of her corpse after it had been half eaten by rats and feral dogs. I was gratified to find that at least there was no malice in her, just fear, so much fear it emanated from her in waves of unmanning terror. I was nearly sick. I forced myself to smile, determined to help if I could. "Hello," I rasped, my voice quivering and forced. "What's your name?" She looked at me, and her eyes expanded slightly, and I knew she was trying to cry, an impossible feat for a spirit in her state. For the first time since I stepped into the tunnel, I knew no fear, only empathy. This poor girl, I don't remember. No wonder she was stuck. Different spirits stay in the world for different reasons. Some were afraid, some were angry, some were simply lost. But all of them could be dangerous. Part of my job was figuring out what kept them here whilst still keeping my skin intact. Small part of me hoped that this would be an easy job. I knelt down, putting my hands on my knees to support my weight, and stared straight into the orbs which passed for her eyes and forced a smile. Despite my revulsion at the state of her close up, "Well, you remind me of a little girl I once knew. Her name was Annie. Do you mind if I call you that?" The apparition smiled in return, if a little unsure. "Annie. Yes, that sounds nice. Thanks, mister." I stood up again. I could almost feel the pieces clicking into place. I was heading on the right track, but I was missing something. A nagging thought writhed around in the back of my mind, just out of reach. I ignored it, hoping it was nothing important. "Well, Annie, why don't you tell me what you're doing down here?" The specter's face, or what was left of it, fell again. "I'm lost." "Lost? But this is just a tunnel, Annie." As I spoke, I made sure to emphasize her name every time it passed my lips, willing her to accept it as her own. She was lost. I only had to help her find her way. "A tunnel? But I can't see the way," she wailed. The sound burst through my ears and deep into my spine. I could feel it in my teeth. Nope, we wouldn't have any of that. Gritting my teeth against the noise and the revulsion, I held out my hand invitingly. "Don't worry, Annie. Take my hand. I know the way." A cold, clammy, skeletal hand grasped mine, and as she did so, the light of her eyes disappeared, and I could no longer see the way. "Are you sure, mister?" It was a quiet whisper in the dark, and somehow more sinister and ominous than I ever could have imagined coming from a poor lost soul. "It's dark in here." My whole body trembled, but I held her spectral hand tight and took a step forwards, towards the other end of the tunnel. "I'm sure," Annie told her, "we're going to get you home." The words sounded braver than they felt, and each sliding step forward to avoid tripping on unseen refuse brought me more trepidation, but I was more sure now than ever that I was doing the right thing. I dare not try to light the Zippo again. Annie was trusting me, and the light had gone out for a reason. Instinctively, I knew that the darkness was part of what was keeping her shackled here, and braving that tunnel with me by her side could be all it took to release her. It had only taken about 30 steps to reach the nexus, but it was twice as many before the darkness began to clear and I could get a glimpse of the night sky an impossible distance away. I felt a great sense of relief until my arm nearly got yanked out of its socket. Annie had stopped walking with me. "Annie, what's wrong?" "It's too dark that way, mister. He doesn't like it when I go that way." This was unacceptable. I could see the end in sight. I had to figure out a way to push past this. I went down on my haunches, but didn't release her hand. Thankfully, I couldn't see her in the dark any more. "Annie, I need you to be brave. Do you know any songs?" Songs? It was just a whisper now. I could feel her presence fading. I was losing her back to the tunnel, back to madness and isolation. Even the clammy, bony hand I held began to feel a little more ephemeral. "Yeah, Annie, songs." Desperately, I started singing the first song that came to my head, which happened to be the Beatles' "Can't Buy Me Love." Almost immediately, I found her presence strengthening again, and she giggled. "You're funny, mister." I hesitated for barely a moment before I sang, "Please call me Solomon, so I can buy you a diamond ring, my friend, if it makes you feel all right." The giggle turned into a laugh, and I was thankful to hear that it wasn't at all malevolent. She was wholly there again, or as wholly there as a spirit could be. Names have more power than we give them credit for. Why do you think we spend so much time naming things? Why do you think in the Christian Bible Adam named all of the animals? Why do you think we agonize over what to call our kids? I had just willingly given Annie power over me. It was one hell of a gamble, as now, if she were malevolent, she could bypass what few defenses I had against the otherworldly. Luckily, the gamble paid off. "You're funny, Solomon. Will you be my friend?" "Yes, Annie, I'll be your friend. But I need you to be brave for me so we can leave this tunnel behind. It's cold and dark in here. Let's go outside. These tunnels have terrible acoustics for singing." I laughed, and so did she, the madman and the ghost in the underpass. "The way doesn't look that dark any more, Solomon." "Great. Shall we keep walking?" "Okay, Solomon. Yes." "Can you keep singing, please?" "Of course I can, honey." And so I sang as we walked step by step to the end of the tunnel. The night sky glistened at the end, and the sounds of cars roaring by overhead echoed down the tunnel toward us, thankfully muffling my off-key singing as I butchered the sounds of the Beatles and then Nat King Cole. The sound came from behind us, and I ignored it, thinking that it must just be a reverberation of some sort. But Annie stopped again. At least I could see her again in the light drizzling in from the outside world. Not far to go now. "Solomon?" Uh-oh, she was scared. It pulsed from her in crippling waves, making me weak in the knees, and the nagging thoughts in the back of my head met with something she had said. "He doesn't like it when I go that way." She had been gnawed on, as if she had taken the form of her corpse after it was half eaten. Who was he? I've never seen a ghost take the form of a corpse halfway through decompositions and predation. Had something been feeding on her ghost? What the living hell does that? The sound from behind grew louder, more intense. It was a snuffling, bestial sound. Annie started crying. Whatever it was that was keeping her here was outside of my experience. Smart money was to run and leave Annie behind to regroup and figure this all out. I've never been that smart. Besides, there are rules to these things. It was possible that this could very well be the only opportunity I would ever be given to help Annie. Fighting through the waves of terror and nausea, I grabbed Annie by the shoulders, her spectral flesh burning like ice. Annie, honey, we have to keep going, okay? She shook her head, paralyzed with terror. What is it that ghosts are afraid of? Right. Okay, I'm going to pick you up, and I need you to keep singing, please. She looked at me dumbly, seeing through me. Her eyes widened in terror. I had to try. I picked her form up. At least there was that. I wouldn't have been able to if she hadn't wanted me to. My hands would have passed right through her. She weighed nothing at all, whilst at the same time she was the heaviest burden I've ever had to carry. My chest and arms burned whenever her phantasmagoric form came into contact with my living flesh. She's mine. Never have I heard a voice like that in my long, expansive career. Evil intent such as I have never felt dripped from it. What few extra normal senses I possessed told me something very malignant and very powerful was barreling towards us from the Nexus. I ran. I've never run so fast in my life. And Annie, brave little Annie, began singing in my arms. Run, run as fast as you can. You can't catch Solomon. He's the gingerbread man. With every step towards the tunnel's edge, she sang louder and louder. I could feel her propelling me out of that tunnel somehow. Her song lent me speed I knew was unnatural. I was glad then that I had given her my name, for without it she would have no power over me. Then we were in the moonlight. The burning in my arms and chest stopped. A frustrated howl came from the tunnel entrance, where I had been but moments before. I skidded to a halt and turned around, already knowing that there would be nothing there that I could see. I had come to cleanse the Elliott Street underpass. I have failed. There was still something there, something more terrible than I could have ever imagined, something beyond all of my considerable experience. What eats ghosts? Solomon? I looked to the now completely weightless figure in my arms. Annie was whole again. She smiled at me and kissed me on the cheek. My name is Annie Toller. You found me. And then she was gone. I failed to cleanse the tunnel tonight, but I'd saved a lost soul, which was a win in my book. Time to go home, feed the dog, have a scotch, possibly even a double, and try to sleep. Problem was, of course, the car was on the other side of the highway. I didn't think twice. Like many drunks before me, I gave the tunnel entrance a wide berth as I climbed up to the highway to take my life in my own hands, dodging 6 lanes of traffic. There wasn't really a viable alternative.